So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Noah Hawley and Bob Odenkirk.
Who didn't show up? Should we save these, or should we?
Well, my wife could come and sit in the front if she wanted to, and my composer
Kyle?
Jeff Russo could come sit in the front. Otherwise, we feel like
Naomi, you can come up here.
Talking to she's right here. Your wife's right next to you. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, she's there.
Honey.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't have my glasses on.
It's a nice
Hi,
first
everyone.
comment bit.
Let's hear for this guy.
Thank you.
How great is he? Who liked Fargo? Noah, everybody has a couple questions. First of all, it's the book of the summer, this summer, and it's really
That's trademarked,
great
by the way, the book of the summer.
Yeah, I'm saying it. Forget, who's this guy, Michael Cunningham? Who is he? By the way, that must have been exciting to get that.
It was good. Yeah, I bought him a nice breakfast, and I earned the quote out of it. So yeah.
Well, it's really getting nothing but raves everywhere. How does that feel?
It feels terrible. I'll tell you, it's awful. No,
now you've actually had 4 other books you published. One was missed in the list there. It's called Other People's Weddings.
Yeah.
But how have they been received, and how has that experience been?
Well, normally an author's experience on publication day is it's a date circled on the calendar on which nothing happens, and this has been a different experience. And, I said it with Fargo when we sort of hit the fast lane on that show and the recognition we got, which is there's no mistaking it for anything else. You have a good experience, but this sort of thing is a little crazy, honestly. Yeah. And I mean, it's been a whirlwind, and I just try to slow down and enjoy it if I can. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a thing where maybe the TV shows and people becoming familiar with your writing, the characters, the way you tell a story helps you to be read?
Yeah. But, I wanted the book to stand on its own. I
it surely does, but you can also see comparisons to just character development, and there isn't a single character in here who doesn't have sides to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm attracted to that. I'm the no small character mindset and the ensemble. I mean, you found it on Fargo as well, which was, your character was sort of. I mean, when we met the first time, it was like, so this guy's just sort of a comic foil to Allison's character, but he turned out to be the moral center of the show, really, but at the end of it. So that's always attractive to me, and this book lent itself to that because it was a mystery on some level that could only be solved by solving the characters and figuring out who the people on this plane were, and could that help us figure out why it went down. So, under the auspices of writing a plot-driven thriller, I really wrote a character book, which was what was exciting to me.
And a satire on some level.
Yeah.
A little bit.
On some level, I think. Yeah.
A little bit of satire, and not perceived crudely, somebody might say of opinion-driven news, but really, I think a satire of a modern need to have an answer. We are so used to getting answers for everything immediately.
Right.
And we're so frustrated, and then the characters in this book, one in particular, is so frustrated that he can't just have the answer in front of him.
I think we're pattern-seeking animals. It's why we see faces in clouds and everything. And it used to be that we got news delivered to us in information form, and then someone had the idea to deliver it in opinion form, to hide, to put the information into a subjective, like this is what the information means point of view, and now that's what we kind of get. You can either get your information from some place who has a conservative mentality or a more liberal mentality, but that sort of make up your own mind.
Or let yourself become familiar with it. Let time reveal it to you, and you can feel the characters in here, and that's just not okay. We just need to get the answer and tell the story that makes sense of this event, which you tell. And I can't. I have to be careful what I say because I've read the book and I don't want to give it away.
Yeah,
but that's at the core of it, isn't it? Is the need to have an answer? And
yeah, it's a story about a guy who saves a little boy, which is, hands down, I think a good thing to do, right? To save children when they're in danger, and yet, we've sort of reached a point where there's really two parts to a story. There's the building up and the tearing down part, and again, that idea of the pattern seeking. You have, like in Fargo, the reality with life is that it's a little bit random, and there are coincidences that are hard to explain, and they don't fit the regular narrative. So if you have a guy who survived a plane crash who happens to be a painter, whose recent work was about disaster scenes, that seems like it has to mean something, as opposed to a random detail. And so, that's exciting to me, the idea, because they teach you in fiction to kind of take the coincidence and random out of it, the sort of stranger than fiction qualities, because it seems convenient. But really that's, in Fargo what we do as well, which is it's supposed to be a true story, so we have to add to that truthiness of it, which is like sometimes fish fall from the sky, or there's a UFO or something. Yeah.
Now, everybody's second question, besides what is the book about?
Where do I shop? Yeah.
No, everyone's question is how do you do this? How are you juggling all this? Right? Fargo and another series that you've just begun.
Yeah.
And this book, and of course, in my mind, as I told you earlier when we hung out, I figured, he wrote this book in junior high.
No. I have found a rift in the time-space continuum, and I go there for years at a time to write. No, I don't know. You just got to get up in the morning and get stuff done, I think. And look, I won't work on the weekends. I have small kids, and I'm shit after 8 p.m. at night. So it literally becomes about, doing the job, and I don't know. I've got a lot of responsibilities right now, but I'm optimistic about executing. I'm a little doubtful about executing all of them, but, there is also that freelance muscle that's hard to exercise, where for a long time, when you're building a career, you just say yes to everything because nobody offers you anything. And then at a certain point, if you have a success, then you get a lot of offers, and there are a lot of great things. Like, wouldn't you like to do a Kurt Vonnegut book? Well, of course, I'd like to do that. Or this, this other show, or adapt your book to. You say yes to that stuff, except then you realize you've said yes to all of it at the same time, and you suddenly have to do all of it. But I don't know.
Well, you've done an amazing thing, generating these great works, and I do think people have become familiar with the kind of storytelling you're so good at, and it'll make this book even more fun. Anybody who loves Fargo is going to love this book, and the characters in it, and the way I love the mix of story and character, and the authorial dialogue almost that you find in all your writing. I love the movie Breathless. It's one of my favorite films, and it's got this incredibly simple story and a gun and a girl, and then these interludes of philosophizing that I just love people doing. I love people talking about how they feel about life and how it makes sense to them. They express their philosophy, and you're very good at that and making that very entertaining and natural, and So it's all a part of this book and all your writing. What do you think about that, though, when you do write, or something like I picked out something like everyone has their path, the choices they've made, how any two people end up in the same place at the same time is a mystery.
I think there's, if you entertain people, they give you permission to do more. That they're happy when you do more on a thematic level or a character level, and certainly on Fargo, under the auspices of telling a crime story where there's a lot of suspense and violence and some humor. Like, we earn the right over a 10-hour period, because it's a Coen Brothers movie ostensibly, to have a 10-minute parable sequence, or to take these flights of fancy, or to start an episode 6 months earlier with Lester buying socks, or whatever it is. It takes you to places in the story that in a 2-hour movie you wouldn't normally go, because you just have to do the plot. And then in a novel, I think that there is a lot of room. The books that I love the best have an almost essayistic quality, where under the rubric of telling a good story, you're also kind of trying, without going on or lecturing people, to try to figure out, well, what does it all mean, and why, all these random elements, and what do they add up to? And certainly that was a big part of this last year of Fargo, was what does it all mean? If knowing we're going to die makes life absurd, why do we do anything? So but again, you want to bury that stuff. You want to make it driven by the character and by the plot. But
well, it's hard to, after you finish reading it, to not think about the satirical side to it, but it's not in any way the major element of the book. I mean, it's a great story and a gripping story and really entertaining, and the stuff about Jack LaLanne is so great.
There's some Jack LaLanne stuff in there.
Jack LaLanne
Finally,
passage.
There's some narrative fiction about Jack LaLanne.
True?
All the stuff about Jack LaLanne is true, yeah.
Really?
He was,
That's fascinating.
Yeah. It used to be that doctors would tell you that if you got your heart rate up too high, you would die. And apparently that's not true. Jack taught us.
Yeah.
And he wore those amazing jumpsuits that he had designed. I
developed a lot of respect for him, especially if that's true.
The guy, when he was 60 years old, he swam from Alcatraz with a 1,000-pound boat tied to his waist. And
that amazing?
No, he was...
It's all in the book.
Yeah, it's all in the book.
Yeah, it's fairly early on in the book. So
30% of the proceeds go to the Jack LaLanne Foundation, by the way.
Now you're reading, and you're like, Jack LaLanne saves the day.
You must have found in Mr. Show, and there is a sense when you're playing with the structure of a thing, and you're able to sort of move between sketches, that it's amazing how flexible the audience can be in sort of moving from idea to idea and sketch to sketch, and the connection of it.
For sure. I think it's much harder to do in what you do, because you can't lose the thread. You have such a longer story to tell, and you have to keep people close for it all. They can't lose track. It's a trickier thing that you do than I. I spin plates, and they only have to spin for like a minute. Well, you're like, I'm going to keep this thing up for 2 hours. Watch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my plates are all broken long before yours have fallen. Let's see. I was thinking about talking about the book, and then I realized how little I can say without giving away. There's stuff about the media in here, and there's so many touchstones to everything we're seeing and experiencing in modern life. And one thought I had was, and you seem to have fun with this idea in Fargo too. It seems like simple answers are not okay for people. Like, people aren't okay with anything. Everything has to be when they look at the world and something goes wrong, they need to have another person behind that, and there has to be a design, a grand design that forced it. And sometimes it's true, and sometimes that's not really true about life.
Yeah, sometimes there's a Kenyan birth certificate that's out there, and we know that we can find it. I think that again, we're the sort of pattern-seeking animals, and there is this sense which goes back, in this country especially, this idea that Oswald couldn't have acted alone.
I was going to say that. I mean, when I bring it up, I've got to say, after all I've read about the JFK thing, I'm like, I think Oswald just did it.
Yeah,
I think that's what happened.
But the amazing thing is that it was an event that was captured on film. And yet, we still think we don't know what really happened, and I think it's this idea that and in the book it's that there's a private plane that goes into the water. I don't know who's read the book or who knows anything about it, but there's a private jet flying back from Martha's Vineyard that goes into the water, and there are two survivors, and one of them is this painter, Scott Burroughs, and then there's the 4-year-old son of a guy who's a CEO of this conservative news network, and a big part of the book is about the sort of news anchor on that network who just refuses to believe that a big man could be killed in a small way, and that it has to mean something else. And then when you discover a detail like the painter in question painted these disaster sequences, that has to mean something. I mean, we want all the details to add up to something that tells you a coherent story that doesn't have any variation in it. And so, I do think that that's a big part of what we do, is we sort of drown out the details that don't add up to the story that we want to believe.
And so do you feel like that's almost a theme to a lot of your work? And how you chase story or do you feel like for this book, I guess my question is, what do you feel, and I'm sure every project is a little different, but what did you start with this book? What ignited the story for you?
Well, there's a story that I had heard from my wife's family about a friend of my wife's dad who had died in a small plane crash with his wife and daughter, and then the daughter, when she was 2, had been kidnapped and had been recovered, and there was something about that idea that this girl had survived this one thing only to be killed in this other way that defied finding meaning in it, right? Because you want to look at it and go, well, why would a child survive one thing only to be killed in this other way? It doesn't mean it's nonsensical. Yeah. And so that's not what the book is about, but it was kind of the catalyst for the book, which is again, we have this desire for meaning, and the reality, I fly a lot. I'm on a lot of airplanes, and there's only one person in control of what happens on that plane, and that's the pilot, and the rest of us are just hoping, you know what I mean? And I think that's what the fascination with when planes go down, or the Malaysian air flight, or the German wing, I mean, because we all know that we have to give up our control to get on those planes. There's something we need to know what happened because we all do it. So, I think there is that desire to add up all the details in a way, and these random elements that we go through. There's this great line in A Serious Man, the Coen Brothers movie, where the guy says, "Accept the mystery," right? Like, which is a great theme with Joel and Ethan's movies. This idea that things happen, you know what I mean? And sometimes
it's weird because it's almost like a mix of this plot, that's driven by a person and their simple, cockeyed desire. But then there are these random things that are a part of it, as they're part of any day, of anyone's life. And then somebody after the fact always wants all of that to matter. Yeah. And it's just not going to happen.
Sometimes the goy's teeth say in Hebrew, "Help me, save me." And, you search and search and you can't figure out what it means. And, and then you just have to move on. You just have to accept the mystery, And I think that is an exciting place in fictional narratives, which again, they certainly in in Hollywood, they tend to drill out of you because they want everything to add up. And if you're going down a road that doesn't lead anywhere, it's frustrating for people, which is,
just to talk about the character that I got to play in the first Fargo, the story of his adopted son.
The Lost Boy.
Which really just... you have never any feature film that you made of that story. You wouldn't come near that thing.
Yeah. And that kid was great. I mean, maybe you want to talk about, he had a lot of lines. He was really nervous because he was a huge Bob Odenkirk fan.
That crazy. So wild.
He's from Minnesota, because a lot of them settled there. And he was in the Captain Phillips.
Captain Phillips.
Yeah.
What a sweet guy.
Yeah.
Just a very sweet, earnest guy, thankful to be there, and also kind of wondering what it all means for him and for all the guys who were in Captain Phillips, some of whom probably just went back to their regular jobs, but
probably.
some who thought, I don't know, maybe I could get to be an actor. Wouldn't that be amazing? He was one of the people trying to make it work here. Yeah. And, of course, their stories are amazing, and you must... remember as you go to the gelato place and they don't have your favorite flavor.
Right. Yeah.
The story you were told about the boy who lived in a dumpster for 4 years while he Yeah.
And that story it's interesting because that story where he went to the same supermarket every day was a true story that was told to me by a housekeeper who had come to America. She was from Central America, from Guatemala, and
build a wall.
And she had gone under or over the wall and had her backpack stolen and literally had wandered and didn't know where to go, but she went to the same supermarket every day, and these friends of hers showed up one day. And it's one of those things where you can't believe that it's actually true, but it was completely true, the randomness of life. And there was this element that I felt like it brought to the show, but also to Bill's character, the sort of joy on his face, that moment, it's like, that he found this kid, and,
it says a lot about the kind of simplicity that he had. It wasn't just stupidity.
No.
It was a kind of a real big heart, a crazy heart that blocked his eyes.
Yeah, and look,
he couldn't see it.
I love that moment, where you didn't want to think big thoughts about the nature of things. Like that's a very legitimate thing of wanting to live in a simpler world and not wanting to have to think about the nature of evil or what everything means, or to just be in a world where magically things work out. The kid that you thought you lost, you find, and there's something so romantic about that this idea that your friend from high school could be guilty of these crimes is you just don't want to live in that reality.
Right. And it was amazing. And this book is filled with characters and their stories and surprises and revelations about who they really are, not who they seem to be the first time you meet them, or the type of person they are based on a type that from popular culture or the world. Because there's certain characters in here that are you would immediately in your mind think of somebody in the culture now, but then there's layers to them that make them unique and fill them out. It's a wonderful book. It's a lot of fun to read and surprising, and it's gonna tear things up. They're gonna have to build more bookstores to sell it.
That'd be awesome.
We only sell Noah Hawley's book. Do you sell all of his books? No, just the most recent one. That's the only. We don't have any other Noah Hawley books. By the way, I do have a question. How is it for people who do like this book, which is going to be everybody who reads it? Talk about your other books briefly. The other four, are they similar in style, or imagine there's some progression. And
yeah, they're different. I mean, the last book was called The Good Father, and it was sort of a similar, the most similar in that it was what I would call an emotional thriller. It sort of starts with the catalyst of this doctor whose son from his first marriage is accused of shooting a presidential candidate, but it wants to be a plot-driven book, but it turns out to be a character-driven book, and it's a book about this man who divorced his wife when the kid was 7, and he's trying to figure out, was he a good father or not a good father, and can he make up for it by being a good dad now, and they're different. I mean, one of the things that I love as a writer is to try to reinvent genres as character pieces. So, there's sort of an anti-romantic comedy in there, Other People's Weddings, and there's a sort of family novel with The Punch, and the first novel was about a professor of conspiracy theories whose wife is killed and is trying to figure out, he finally has the conspiracy he always wanted, but there's sort of no joy in it for him at this point. And so I just always like that idea of taking a form or a genre that people are familiar with and then try to reinvent it either structurally or character-wise. So, they're all available in one form or another for people to buy.
Let's go.
Or
now,
support your local library.
We're going to take some questions. So anybody? Yeah. Wow. Holy.
She has a question.
I just missed a reference, and I'm hoping, I apologize for my ignorance, I'm hoping you'll help me. The Goy said through his teeth help.
Oh, The Goy's Teeth. Yeah, so in A Serious Man, the Coen Brothers movie.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Michael Stuhlbarg is trying to figure out the meaning of life, and he goes to 3 rabbis, and the second one he goes to tells him the story of the Goy's Teeth, which is this dentist who, did an impression of this Goy's Teeth, Goy being a non-Jewish person, and on the inside in Hebrew it was written, "Help me save me," and he was trying to figure out what does it all mean, so he's examining the teeth of all his patients, he's examining his own teeth, his wife's teeth in her sleep, and, he's trying to figure out what it all means, and ultimately he can't figure it out at all. And so he just moves on with his life. And Michael Stuhlbarg says, "What about the Goy?" And the rabbi says, "The Goy? Who cares about the Goy?" So that's the explanation for that.
Anybody? Yes.
I'm going to read the book.
Okay.
I haven't got to it yet, but
Yeah.
It came out on last Tuesday, so you're okay.
But while I have you here, could you talk about how you crafted that Mike Milligan character? Like what went through your head?
Oh, yeah.
So
in the second season. It's interesting because there's something that Bokeem Woodbine brought to that character that was not planned on the page. There was an affect. There was he just filled out the space in a way that I hadn't necessarily intended. But one of the things that was interesting to me with crafting that second season of Fargo was, it was set in 1979, and I didn't just want the time period to be a backdrop. I wanted to try to turn 1979 into a crime story, and one of the things about that second half of the 70s was it really was, post Summer of Love, post Watergate, Vietnam, the conspiracy did go all the way to the top, but there was this sort of sense of the flowery revolution of the 60s had become this radical violence of the 70s, and there was this moment where sort of all the disenfranchised groups thought they were going to get a seat at the table, which was the American Indian movement and second wave feminism, and so I wanted to explore that through Gene Smart saying, "Why can't a woman be boss?" or Hansi's character, and there was Bokeem's character, Mike Milligan, who was a guy who didn't really fit in anywhere. He was not really at home. He was such an iconoclast. He wasn't really at home in the African American community, and he was not really welcome or at home in the sort of white corporate crime syndicate. So I wanted to write this character who was really kind of at odds with everyone around him, and yet he was so sophisticated and thoughtful and romantic on some level, but that first day that Bokeem showed up, and I directed him on those scenes, that roadside scene with Ted Danson. It was the first time he spoke a line, I was like, what just happened? So you hope for that, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Go ahead.
How does your success in film and TV kind of bleed into your process writing prose?
Well, it gives you confidence, I think. You sort of, I'm like a 20-year overnight success, so, there's something really nice about that, which is, I've written these 4 other books in obscurity on some level, and the last one, The Good Father, was a book that was poised. The publisher paid a good sum for it, and it was, poised to break out, and then, as happens sometimes, there was a book that was published, just a month earlier, called Defending Jacob, which was kind of a legal thriller about a father who has to defend his son in court. And, that book was very successful, and it kind of took all the air out of the room. So it was this very weird moment where the publisher they were going to spend a lot of money, it was going to be a huge thing, and then suddenly there was no one, literally we heard from, one reviewer, I just reviewed a book about fathers and sons, I'm not interested. And you're like, wait, what just happened? This was supposed to be something different. So when you sit down to write again, there is a sense of this may just be a hobby for which I'm paid on a certain level. I keep bamboozling people into publishing these books, but it was my first love and, a big part of my identity, and I did, when I first...
What was the journey from, you went to Sarah Lawrence? Uh-huh. Then you were in computers in San Francisco?
No, I did. I was. What did I do? I was a musician, and then I started for a day job in New York. I worked for the Legal Aid Society in the family court, so a very serious gig. And then I moved to San Francisco and sort of did some paralegal work there. But I'd started writing fiction at that time, and then. I was part of a group of writers and filmmakers up there called the Writers Grotto, and we had our own office space in an old converted dog and cat hospital, and bring my dog to work, and we'd shoot hoops and have lunch, and it was great. I don't know why I ever left really, but one of the guys there had started doing some screenwriting, and I thought, that's I used to help him kind of break story and stuff, so I wrote a script, and then. Ended up coming down here. But even on that first trip, I had the sense of, I can get back on a plane and go back to San Francisco and I'll be happy if this is just a lark. And that seemed meaningful, like something I should pay attention to, which is it's important. If you do just one thing, that thing owns you, right? If you only write TV and there's a fallow period, then you got nothing, But if I continued to write fiction, if I continued to do screenwriting even when I got into TV, you're always going to have options, and that seemed really important to me.
Yeah. Go ahead, right there.
How does one form of writing influence the other?
Well, each medium is different. And, fiction is really informed by the internal states of characters, and it's a much more inside-out process, and a screenplay is really behavior and dialogue. That's what you have. You have action and words, and that doesn't mean that the inside... You have to figure out all that stuff. What is the character thinking? What are all the organic moments that build up to the decisions that they make? But on fiction, you see that. You see it on the page, and it's why you hear a lot of novelists talk about how I thought the character was going to do one thing, and then they did something else, because as you write it, it sort of moves in one direction or another. But I'm supposed to adapt this book now for Sony, and my goal is to, in doing it, would be, forget what the book is. What's the best movie here? It's something that I feel like was really important to me in Fargo, in that in both seasons, was you got to tell the story with the camera. Because Joel and Ethan are great screenwriters, but they write a lot of things they don't direct, and those movies are never Coen Brothers movies, right? So there's something in the cinematic nature and the directorial execution of those scripts that make it a Coen Brothers movie. And so part of what I had to do was figure out what that is, because you can't ask them, how do you make a Coen Brothers movie? Because that's kind of a lame question, I think. So there's a similar dynamic here, which is it's a cliche, but a picture is worth 1,000 words in a way, and you have to figure out what's the most economical way to express something, which in a book you have as many pages as you want.
I would also like to hear you comment on the ways in which this kind of serial drama on TV has generated a different kind of writing for TV that is maybe more closer to novel writing. There's something about, and I think it's true in Better Call Saul and Fargo and even Mad Men, where I think about novel writing.
Right.
When I see that writing. It's the only thing I can compare it to. I don't really compare it to TV that I knew before.
Yeah, well, this 10-hour movie, as I think about it, is a very different animal because it is something that ends, right? And you know it's going to end, and therefore you should know how it ends when you start, so that like in a 2-hour movie, you can start to lay in all the things you need to know. In that first year of Fargo, when Lester goes to his brother's house, I know that in the 10th hour I'm going to, no spoilers, I'm sorry, but I'm going to use a bear trap. So that bear trap is on the wall, and every time I'm in that garage, I show it to you, and I also show you a machine gun, so you think that's what we're going to end up using, which we don't. But, but I knew, going into, when I had to scout a location for Keith Carradine's diner, that I needed 2 doors, because in a certain episode, someone was going to go in one door and someone was going to go out another, and that level of detail, that foreknowledge, is really important in telling a complete story, especially because it needs to feel sort of slightly random and accidental, and so it has to be really well planned so that it can do that. But what's always amazing to me about Vince's work, is that he doesn't know, you know what I mean? But it always feels like he has this out of the frying pan into the fire kind of mentality, where he managed with Breaking Bad over whatever the 6 or 7 years was to just keep you like you didn't know each twist and turn, like how is he going to get out of this one? And
well, I think he felt the same way.
No, I know, but
off on it.
Most people you could see them sweat, but you never really did. And Saul is something else entirely, which is, it's starting to build that suspense, but it's a more moral suspense, of this guy's journey from, someone who you see as having hope, you know what I mean? Right. Like, this is a good guy. He could be a good guy, but we know who he turns into,
Yeah. The Crushing of Hope.
Yeah.
This is the subtitle.
Great television.
To just piggyback a little bit on what Bob was asking you, was there a TV series of, recent 20 years where you watched it, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe what's possible on TV?
Well, everyone talks about The Wire. I certainly felt like, there was something in that series from that very first scene, where he's sitting on the stoop with this kid talking about this dice game. And he's like, every time, there's a dead body on the ground. He's like, every week this kid would get to a certain point, he'd grab the money and run. He's like, why did you let him play if you knew he was going to do that? It's like, you got to let him play, man. It's America, And something in that first scene to that last scene, where you realize they'd introduced all these young characters and you didn't know why or what they were going to do, and then you realized in the last few episodes that those kids were just turning into all the older characters who were now being killed off, like it was this cycle, So you realize that there is this, Dickensian or novelistic sense of storytelling, that was really possible. And then, Breaking Bad was a huge influence as well of, getting my hands on those scripts as well and seeing the, 4 or 5 pages without dialogue where you really saw how he trusted the camera to tell the story and the suspense. And you look at a movie like No Country for Old Men and how many pages, how many minutes would go by without a line of dialogue and how exciting that is. And then, it's just about getting away with that in a TV format,
Go ahead. Yep.
So when you start a new project, do you have a go-to process where you lock yourself in a room, you go to different coffee shops, compare some painters, and you get an outline? Is there something that you tend to do more frequently?
No, it's,
you go to Tijuana.
I go to Tijuana, yeah, and the rest of it is kind of a blank. I don't remember the rest of it.
Noah Hawley's 3 tips for writing.
No,
go to Tijuana.
I'm always looking for something where I can play with the structure. I'm always looking, when I look at things, it's like, well, what can I do with this that's interesting, and either on a character level or structurally or thematically, because any old story can be new again. I mean, you look at a movie like 500 Days of Summer, which is a romantic comedy, but because they tell it completely out of order, like, in the first 5 minutes that they're going to break up, but you find yourself going, like, no, they're going to make it, man. Like, it's unrealistic, and yet that's what we are as people. We want things to work out. So I always get excited when I feel like there's a really interesting way in and then a really great story to tell.
Back here.
Do you read fiction while you're writing novels? And then, are there any books that you've read recently or that you've read while you were writing?
You've read some in-flight magazines, I assume.
A lot of in-flight magazines, yes. A lot of recipes for, succotash or whatever it is. Yeah, it's hard to read a novel while writing a novel, I think, and this was just sort of a degree of difficulty, sort of exponentially harder, because, I wrote the first third of this book before your year of Fargo, and it went into a drawer, and then, we won some awards, and my agent quite rightly sort of blew the dust off and sent it out, and we sold it very quickly, and then a film sale after that, and then I had to finish the book while we were finishing the second year of Fargo, and the reality is the hardest thing about writing a book is that when you write a book, you have to read the book. You know what I mean? Like you're 300 pages into it, and you're like, okay, before I can write any more, I have to read 300 pages of this book while I'm doing all those other things. And you have to carve out that mental space for it. So, it becomes very difficult to read other things. And I tend, when writing, anything, to be more attracted to reading nonfiction, or there's a lot of research that goes into the work that I do, and some of it is thematic or philosophical, and some of it is you got to understand how a private jet company works, or how a cable news network works, or any of those sorts of things. So and then you just, if you've read enough in the past, it informs you. So yeah,
right here.
Did you get any inspiration for your book from the Mr. Show?
From the Mr. Show, yeah.
From what?
The Mr. Show plane crash?
Oh, the lifeboat sketch?
Yeah, the guy who eats everyone.
I was on an island eating a coconut, and I saw this here nasty stank-ass bitch float by. I don't remember it exactly, but it's a great one, right?
The fat man who
The fat one. Oh, yeah. No, that's a crash in the Andes, who ate all the other people on board, even though he knew where the local village was. Got his hair done there.
It's in there. It's all in there.
No, the Lifeboat sketch is a great, if you're listening to this, go to YouTube and watch Lifeboat. It's one of the greats. Ridiculous. You know what it is? You know the sketch?
I don't think I've seen it, no.
It's like it's a Jerry Springer show.
Right.
Was doing a special week of shows in a Caribbean island, and they went out on a boat, and something happened. It sunk, and everyone who was on the boat, who's on the show, got on the lifeboat. So there's this stupid. They're dying.
Right.
But they're having this stupid argument about who cheated with who.
Right.
And the talk show host keeps using a flare as a microphone, even though he's just trying to get everyone to focus on staying alive.
Right.
But can't stop
being a host.
The stupid show from happening.
I like it.
It's a good one. It's a goodie. Yeah, go ahead.
When you're writing a novel, it's a pretty solitary experience and kind of creating a movie.
Yeah.
But it's a hypothetical movie that the reader can see.
Right.
I started reading the book just now. It's really cinematic. Did you find it hard then to go into this other thing where you don't have that kind of control? There's all these moving parts. There's budgets. And you're working with all these different actors. Is that a hard transition for you? And then did you almost like, when you were working on Fargo, did you almost like crave the cave of solitude again to just be on your own writing?
Well, I like to joke that, when you work in Hollywood, the phone rings every half hour and someone tells you they love you, and when you write a novel, the phone never rings, in that room. But, the interesting thing is like when you write fiction, it's a relationship, right? It's you write the words, but the reader does half the work there because they're creating the images in their head, and so you're engaging their imagination even as you're telling them what happened. And my goal with Fargo is to do the same thing, which is, when we watch something, it's a much more passive medium, and you see it with binge watching as well, which is like, you have Netflix on, and the episode ends or the movie ends, and it's like, if you do nothing for the next 10 seconds, we will show you another episode, and so you tend to go into this zombie-esque state. So, what I would do if you look at that first season of Fargo and the second one too is every episode started somewhere confusing. You know what I mean? It was either 6 months earlier and Lester was buying socks, or we were in a fish tank. Like there was this sense that I wanted to snap people out of that zone, and the minute that you kind of go, wait, where am I? Now you're engaged again, and I think when you introduce those elements, those nonlinear, sometimes
there's a lot of that in the book too.
Yeah, and sometimes fish fall from the sky. Like you're engaging the audience's imagination. They have to fill in the gaps between the things they understand and the things they don't understand, and that's not meant to be confusing. It's meant to make it more engaging for the audience.
And you seem to like, based on your talking about
Bokeem, yeah,
Woodbine, that kind of revelation that you get from watching an actor too.
Yeah, I think so.
That's gotta be fun to see.
Well, and it's part of the process with the network as well, which is like, you underwrite things sometimes because, again, there's a simplicity. The example I'll give is, the last scene of our season, Molly gets a call that it's over, and she goes and talks to Colin Hanks, and and he says, they're giving me accommodation, and she says, I'm going to be chief. I got a call from John Landgraf, who runs the network, the day we were shooting that, and he said, look, it's a good scene on paper. I don't know if it's a great scene. I know that the last scene in the movie is sublime. So I don't know what I'm saying really, except like, is this the best way to end this season? And I said, well, look, it's not the last day of production. Let me shoot it, and I'll cut it together, and I'll show you, and then we'll decide. And I went to set. And Matt Shackman was shooting that episode, and I said, okay, we're going to do this as a oneer because, my instinct was what made that last scene of the movie sublime was that it was simple. She's lying in bed with her husband, and he got the 3-cent stamp, and she's got 2 more months, and tomorrow's going to be a normal day. And so we shot it as a oneer, and she gets the phone call, and then we follow her in, and it turns into a 3-shot, and they're on the sofa, and they're watching Deal or No Deal because for some reason that was the only thing I wanted them to watch, and because it was such of the time, and he says they're giving me accommodation tomorrow, and then there's a lot of silence as they're watching, and he says they should really give it to you, and she says, no, it's okay, I get to be chief. And then I knew at that, when I was talking to him, that it was the one place in the season I was going to use the original Carter Burwell theme, but I didn't say that on the phone because why ruin that moment? That's part of what the managing up process is like you want them to experience that moment. That theme is so iconic and so powerful, and so I cut it together, and there was never really a conversation afterwards. Wow. So it is like sometimes you think, it's got to be really complicated to be great, but the reality is the opposite. It's got to be really simple, and then it can be great. So, yeah.
Well, we have time for. We'll take one more question right here.
I wanted to ask how you navigate between showing and telling as modes of story, showing and telling as modes of storytelling. Like you can get something like the first few seconds of adaptation, where he's just like spitting a bunch of feelings at you, and you have something like No Country for Old Men, where they're just showing you,
right?
And you're just like, so how do you decide?
Yeah, I just want to comment on that and add to that conversation, which is, there's this bias against narration. It's considered a cheat or a shortcut or what. I love good narration. I don't know why. Obviously, if it's bad or pointless, then no. But it can be amazing.
It can be if it's not used as a clarity crutch. If it's not used to sort of tell you what the camera should be showing you, and a lot of times that voiceover is added later. Like the Blade Runner's famous example.
What was the movie? Mike Judge's awesome movie that got so beat up? Idiocracy.
Yeah. I really like stories within stories. So, I love when characters tell stories inside of stories. And there was a great story that Billy told driving Oliver Platt about this dog that he had to shoot. And, in the parables, that sort of oral storytelling tradition within stories is really exciting. But, I don't think that's a way to move the action forward. And I think, certainly suspense, which is something we try to do a lot of, is best served with very little, and it's more about the music and the sound design and which is the other element, when you're sitting down to write something that that you're going to make. It's you have to look at what the final thing is going to be, and you have to be able to project and say, okay, well, I started talking with the composer at the outline stage, and by the time I'm location scouting, I have 8 or 10 pieces of music, and we have this, we share the same sound designer as you guys use on Saul and Breaking Bad, God. Nick Forshager, and you sort of strip it all away in your mind and go, okay, well, I know that in this sequence, they're going to be walking, the senior Gerhardt out, and somebody parked too close to him, and the guy's going to get in and try to start the car, and the car's going to pull in. Like, that's all going to be about the sound design and the tension of the length of those shots and everything. So, there is this balance between telling a story with words and telling it with pictures, and they're both great, and they're both tools that you should use.
Did that answer your question? I think it's a tough. There's no rules to answer that question. It's your instinct, right? You're just relying on your instinct of like, I've got to go here now. It's just we've got to get going, or we've got to shake people up. It's that thing of keeping people involved, keeping them surprised, giving them answers.
Yeah, one thing that I think that I'm pretty good at in both this novel and in the show is you got to understand what the audience's expectations are at every moment. They're watching it or they're reading it. What are they thinking is going to happen? What do they think is going to happen next? What do they want to happen? And then you can either give that to them or you give them something else, but you have to understand that if they want one thing to happen and you're giving them something else, you have to make that other thing pretty attractive.
You have to think about what it means to have done that.
So, there was that element where everyone thought at the end of the first year that Molly should have been the one who got Billy, but instead Colin was the one who got him, and that worked in a different way for a different reason. But what was interesting there, obviously, was here it was a different story than the movie, and yet in the end she was pregnant and he was in a cabin and she had left the building, and part of you thought, oh my God, she's going. It's going to be just like the movie. She's going to find him in the cabin, and then even though that I'd shown you Colin Hanks walk into that cabin, by the time we got back there, most people had forgotten that he was there. And there's this moment where, right as he steps out, where you both remember that he's there and realize that he's there, and it's this really weird feeling, I think, which is like you figure it out a split second before you see it happen, and it's one of those hair-raising kind of moments, and those are really exciting to try to create.
Well, you've created a lot of them.
Thank you.
If you fulfill your contracts, you will be creating a lot more of them.
Yes.
Let's hear it for Noah Hawley.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. Now, there's a lot of books to sign.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.